Here we are. Okay, so we're in Daniel chapter 10. Daniel chapter 10, verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus the king of Persia, which is essentially right where we were. Okay, plus or minus, I don't know what, but not much. So the point is, there's a lot going on. Sometimes you'll have periods where there's quote-unquote nothing going on, although there better be something going on. And then you'll have this flurry of activity. Right now we're in a little flurry of activity, okay? And it'll go on for, a few years. So Daniel chapter 10, 1 through 12. Daniel is set up this way. Our outline for this section is, chapter 10 is an introductory vision to the main vision. There's the main vision, which is chapters 11 and 12. Chapter 10 is introducing that, and it's first a vision of God on his throne. Chapter 10, verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the message was true and one of great conflict. But he understood the vision of the message and had an understanding of the vision. Okay, so right off the bat, this begins with, it's bad. Bad things are going to happen. This entire section, especially chapter 10, is full of, man, there's a lot of bad things that are going to happen. Just listen to the language of Daniel. In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. I don't know if he was mourning before this vision or after this vision, or if it's around. Sometimes they use the expression in those days as the same time. I don't know. But he's mourning, okay? So there's a message of great conflict, and he's mourning. So it's not getting happier yet. For 3 entire weeks. I did not eat any tasty food, nor did meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all until the entire 3 weeks were completed. On the 24th day of the 1st month, so this would be somewhere around our April time frame, something like that, but their 1st month of the year, while I was by the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz. This says a certain man. I cannot help but think that this language reminds me of Revelation chapter 1, which we just read, and it also reminds me of Ezekiel chapter 1, which both of those are a vision of God, Revelation chapter 1 being a vision of Jesus Christ himself. I don't know exactly how all this is related. I have never done a study of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. If I were, this might be where I'd start. Verse 6, his body was like beryl, his face had the appearance of lightning, his eyes were like flaming torches, his arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze. Ezekiel will say that he saw from his waist up, the body was like fire and bronze, burning metal. And from his waist down, his body was burning. So we have the same imagery here. The sound of his words like the sound of a tumult. This is like John hears in the book of Revelation. I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, while the men who were with me did not see the vision, yet nevertheless there was great dread on them. What does that remind you of? Somebody going down the road, Saul. Same things going on here. They ran away to hide themselves. Yeah, and Daniel's going to do a face plant, which seems to be somewhat common, right? They have this vision or encounter with God, and next thing you know, they want to run away. In Revelation, it'll say in chapter 6, the last of it, the last of chapter 6, Revelation chapter 6, when the judgment just gets going. They will say to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, from the wrath of the land, for the great day of their wrath has come. So again, in Daniel, we have people wanting to hide. Although these are faithful, still there's some encounter with God, and they say, I got to get out of here. In Revelation, we have the evil who have an encounter with God, the great day of his wrath, and they say, we got to get out of here. In Revelation 6, the last question in that chapter is, and who is able to stand? As in, everybody fears. Everybody fears when the Lord manifests himself. The question is, who's able to stand up afterward? Well, we know the answer is his faith. Okay. So, verse 8, I was left alone and saw this great vision, yet no strength was left in me, for my natural color had turned a deathly pallor, and I retained no strength. But I heard the sound of his words, and as soon as I heard the sound of the words, I fell into a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Then behold, a hand touched me, set me trembling on my hands and knees, and he said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I'm about to tell you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. But he said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel. For from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and on humbling yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief priests, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the latter days. All right, if we get nothing else out of this chapter, remember that everything we're about to talk about is about Israel. That's who, and the when is in the latter days. Verse 15, when he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. And behold, one of them, resembling a human being, was touching my lips. Then I opened my mouth to speak, and spoke and said to him who was standing before me, O my Lord, as the result of the vision, anguish has come upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord? As for me, there remains no strength in me, nor has any breath been left in me. Then this one with human appearance touched me again and strengthened me. And he said, O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Take courage. Be courageous. Now, as soon as he spoke to me, I received strength. And I said, may my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. And he said, do you understand why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight the prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. All right. If I'm going to summarize chapter 10, it's going to be this. Bad things are going to happen. So bad that Daniel is in terror. He's in anguish. He falls asleep face first. He's so bad off that this one has to say to him, hey, don't be so bad off right now. Take courage. Be courageous. Stand up. I'm with you is what this one is saying. So the message, which is about their people to take place at the end times, is not going to be a fun message. It's going to be a bad message. Now, we can make all sorts of points we want to about the prince of the Persia and the prince of Greece and all that's going on there, but I'm not going to right now. If you guys want to, save it for a little later. Comments or questions on chapter 10 before we get into the real vision?
Okay, are you not saying anything now because it's not literal, or because it's a lot of argument to make it literal?
I'm sorry, what?
You're skipping the Persian Greece stuff. That's fine, but I'm curious, is it because it takes a long time to get to...
the only point I would make is one that I make all the time, and that is there's a battle going on, and this is an illustration of it. We've got a window, the door of heaven has been opened, and he tells us there's something going on with a battle in heaven. That's Revelation chapter 12. I think you are familiar with that. So this is the same thing going on here. I know that much. I told you I'm not going to talk about this. You tricky. I don't know. Is there some way that nations have representative spirit beings in heaven? I guess so. I'm done talking. Would you like to make a comment on that?
No, I was just wondering if it was a matter of you didn't want to spend too much time speculating. Or
Yeah, that's it.
You can't get very specific here, but it just takes forever. That's what I was
No, I don't have much to say. Maybe somebody else does. All right, so Daniel 11, a vision of Israel's future contrast or conflict. Okay. First, there is a brief mention of the Persian kingdom. All right? Chapter 11, verse 1. In the first year of Darius the Mede. Okay, so we are talking about the kingdom of Persia. I arose. So this being, which I take to be the Lord, somehow is talking and saying in the first year, so a couple years ago, 2 years ago, right, because we're actually now in the third year of Cyrus, so in the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. Now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. Okay, now understand this. Here's our lovely chart. Wonderful. They are in the reign of Cyrus, and he says there's going to be the 4th king from now. So Cambyses, Smerdis, Darius is 3, and then a 4th one will be rich. Xerxes, so Darius goes up, and you can see underneath here, it talks about Marathon, the Battle of Marathon, which happened in 490. Well, they lost. They, being the Persians, lost. So, yeah, Greece got picked on here, but they won. Greece won. Down here, Persia will come back by Xerxes. He gathers up the whole nation, and he says, we're going to go beat them up. And guess what? They went and beat them up a couple times, okay? So Thermopylae, and then they sailed around, and there was the battle on the water. Okay, so Xerxes, what does it say here? Will arouse the whole empire of Persia against the realm of Greece. Yeah, that's exactly what Xerxes did. Okay. Verse 3. And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule. Now there's a transition here, and this is talking about Greece now, okay? So it skips some kings. There are about 100 years worth of kings, a little bit less, in Persia. But then it jumps right to, and verse 3, a mighty king will arise. He will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward 4 points of the compass, but not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them. Okay, here we start talking about Greece and their impact on Israel. Remember, this whole message is actually about Israel, but he's going to go through these nations. And right now he gets to Greece. This is a reference to Alexander the Great, right? That's what Alexander the Great, he ran across. In 336, he conquers all of Greece. Okay, he's a Macedonian. He comes down, he conquers all of Greece. Macedon is part of Greece, we think, and they would think sometimes too, but technically it was separate. So he comes down, he conquers all of Greece. 3 years later, he's conquered all of Egypt. That's pretty ambitious. 2 years later, he's conquered all of Asia, and, well, Persia. And what is that? 4 years later, he's conquered, 5 years later, he's conquered all. So in 10 years, remember, he's the goat that's charging across the land without his feet touching the ground. This says, as soon as he does it, as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom will be broken up. Yes, he dies. For whatever reason, he drank some poison or whatever it is. During Alexander's unexpected death, while on his deathbed, he was asked to whom he would leave his kingdom, and he answered, to the strongest, because he had no son. Actually, his son was in his wife's womb at the time. All right, so he says, to the strongest, you all fight it out. All right, so we have 5 generals here. That will change, okay? But remember, this says to the 4 points, as in the whole. It's not literally this way on the compass and this way, although it's pretty close. But the idea is that his whole kingdom is going to be parceled out. We have the Ptolemies down here, the Seleucids, Antiochus, Cassander, like Semicus. I want us to take a break, one quick break from our Daniel class. Slip into Revelation. During Alexander's unexpected death, while on his deathbed, he was asked to whom he would leave the kingdom, and he answered, to the strongest. I'll give you one guess as to what that word is in Greek. What he said, it's the word mighty in Almighty. Okay? Remember, so God says, I'm the Almighty. This is Revelation now. I'm the Almighty. Because they were taking this word and saying, no, we're the mighty. right? Here's an illustration of that. Is the very second half of that word in Almighty, okay? He says, remember, the idea is whoever's the strongest gets to rule. And he's saying right here, whoever's the strongest, you guys get to rule, okay? So there is a tie, you see, by the time we get to Revelation 350 years later, they're taking that word and using it more. Well, we'll just hold on a second. All right. So, verse 5 says, then the king of the south will grow strong. So we're talking about the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. We're going to focus on those two. I am not reading this whole thing. I'm not going through it all. I don't know enough to go through it all. I do know a little. The king of the south will grow strong, although with one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion, his dominion will be a great dominion indeed. After some years, it's about 100 years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. Yeah, the king of the south says, here, have my daughter. Marry her. We'll be friends. We'll be pals. But she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain in his power. This is the one in the north. But she will be given up, and along with those who brought her and the one who sired her, as well as he supported her in those times. Okay, so I got to see if this is up here. Okay, so this is in the later year, or the Ptolemies and the Seleucids in the early years. What do I got next? Okay, in chapter 11, verse 6, which we just read. In 250 BC, Ptolemy Philadelphus, the king of the south, attempted to make peace with Antiochus II Theos, the king of the north, by sending his daughter Bernice for marriage. The thing is that Antiochus was already married, and his wife, Laodicea, after whom the town is named, well, she didn't take too kindly to that. Because he was going to divorce her. So she poisoned them both and killed them both, which is exactly what the text says. She will lose her power, he will lose his power, is what the text says. Slip into your Revelation class. Come out of Daniel for a second, slip into your Revelation class. Remember, Revelation is all about God saying, I'm God. Is anything about that seem to fit with our discussion of Revelation? What is it, John?
Well, not in the Revelation class, but I'm thinking about the number of times where he comes in and says, who else can name the end from the beginning?
Okay. Oh, yes. Yeah, you're dealing with the Daniel 10 and 11 and 12 all in one. Actually, I'm just talking about this statement right here. What's this word here? You know that this word is. What is he calling himself? By the way, do you know what epiphany is? Everybody ever have an epiphany? It's a revelation is what it is. We're waiting for the epiphany of Christ. The epiphany. So Antiochus, who? Who do we know? Antiochus Epiphanes. He's saying, I'm the revealed one. This guy is saying that he is God. Okay? Now this is 300, 400 years beforehand, 500, 250 years, or 300, whatever, before Revelation. But my point is, by the time we get to Revelation, this is where it starts. This is where it begins. Alexander the Great and a few before him start saying, I'm God. And they really think it. Because Alexander the Great conquered this entire world in 10 years. Nobody had ever done it. And if you had done that, what would you start to think about yourself if you're not thinking right? I'm a big guy. In fact, I'm bigger than a big guy. People starting to call me gods. There's prophecies out there about me. I must be a god. Okay. First of all, let me. The very rude elevator screamers are paid professionals, only looking to make senators look bad. Does anybody know who wrote this? Don't fall for it. Also, look at all the professionally made identical signs, paid for by Soros and others. These are not signs made in the basement from love. Troublemakers, pound troublemakers, hashtag. Anybody know who wrote that? Say it again.
Alex Jones.
You wish. Our president wrote that. Okay, when Kavanaugh, Jeff Flake, no, was it? Yeah, Jeff Flake was in the elevator. He's the one getting yelled at. Trump writes this in reply. Now, keep this in mind. Trump writes this. If I say to you POTUS, what do I mean? President of the United States. Anybody tell me what GEOTUS means? I had to look it up too. Geo, George, you should know this, means what? Earth, dirt, farmer, geography, but not here. Here, so I had to look this up. It's like, what's GEOTUS? I know who they're talking about. What does this mean? You know, sometimes you come across something new. Here's what it means. God Emperor of the United States. An alternative acronym to POTUS, used for President Donald Trump, is exclusively owned by his online supporters and Reddit Donald. Okay, I know it's not very broad, but that's not good stuff. That's just, you're playing with something you have no idea what you're playing with here. So, my point is, and you know, how did this guy actually, if you walked up to Antiochus II, would he actually have said, I am God? Probably not backhand then. Probably not. If you walk up to him, Trump, and say, are you God? He's going to say no. He's going to say no. But this morphed into what God fought against in Revelation. And it started with a passing word. We need to be careful with this kind of language. Okay. So here we are. We're fighting these Ptolemaics, Ptolemies, and the Seleucids are fighting back and forth. Okay. So this is going to go on for another 200 years or so. I'll just skip forward to this. From 142 to 62 BC, which I'm jumping ahead in the text, just so I cover this now, and then we'll come back to it. From 142 to 62 BC, during the time of the Maccabees fought for and gained independence. So they were essentially independent for 100 years, 80 years. They were essentially independent, okay? Now, during this time that we'll be reading of, the Jews fight against Hellenism. Hellenists are Greeks. That's what they call themselves. We're Hellenists. And Hellenism is when Alexander the Great, who was educated by Aristotle. Was it Aristotle? Yeah, so he's educated by Aristotle. He says, hey, I'm the smartest guy in the world. This is smart stuff. We got the best. By the way, there's a fight of culture, right? Where should the world's culture be coming from?
From Israel.
From Israel, Jerusalem to the world. Instead, the Athenians are bringing it. They even call themselves, we're the mother. Okay. So, the Pharisees related to separated, the word mean it's related to separated, in an effort to keep pure in the midst of Gentile overrun, begin making rules upon rules. See, we've got to stay away from them, so let's make more rules. The Sadducees, from the Zadokites, the high priestly class, begin ruling the aristocracy. They're the few that actually take the political rule, if you will. They are not as concerned about Hellenism. They don't really care. In fact, they kind of like it, right? And in fact, in our New Testament, what we'll read is that they don't want their place or their station taken from. We don't care about the Romans. We do care. We like our synagogues are fully established during this time. Okay, they had been probably before, probably Ezra. Probably in the time we're reading right now. But by the time we get to here, they are well entrenched. Okay. All right, so now I'm backing up, okay? I just jumped ahead, and now I'm backing up. All I'm going to do are read the few accounts where it directly applies to God's people. I'm not going to read all of this. So in verse 14, chapter 11, verse 14, and I'm also going to read out of the ESV Study Bible. If you get this book, I don't know how much it costs nowadays, probably $25. It's worth it just for Daniel 10 and 11. That's what I think. Okay. Of course, I wouldn't know because it was given to me. Okay. All right. Daniel 11, verse 14. In those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. So, many. I do need to go back just one. Right? Come on. So we have the king of the south, the Ptolemies. Many are rising up against them, many being from the Jews. The ESV Study Bible will give us this commentary. There was indeed instability around the beginning of Ptolemy the fifth Epiphanes' reign. Even a large number of Jews were tired of the heavy taxation of the Tobiads who naturally favored Egypt, and many Jews believed that the rule by the Seleucids would be preferable. So the Jews are ruled by them right now. They say, hey, we're going to rise and rebel. So they rise and rebel against them to get the Seleucids to come down and rule them. Well, it doesn't really work out so well for the Jews. They attempted to overthrow Egyptian rule, but General Scopaz of the Egyptian army, he was angered at them, and he came down and punished the leaders of Jerusalem and Israel, okay? Then in verse 15 and 16, then the king of the north will come, cast up a siege ramp, and captured a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south will not stand their ground. So now you have the Ptolemaics receding, basically, and the Seleucids getting larger and larger and more of a presence in the land. But he who comes, verse 16, he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him, but he will also stay for a time in the beautiful land with destruction in his hand. After this time, the Seleucids come down here, and they will not leave until 62 BC. Okay? They are going to be in the area until 62 BC. I say that the Maccabees fight for and gain independence, but the Seleucids are in the area, constantly bothering them, and so in 63 BC, the Jews will call to, who do you think, for help? The Romans. Say, come Romans, please help us. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I'm going to skip down to verse 25. Verse 25 starts talking about Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Antiochus IV. He will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south with a large army. So meanwhile, hundreds of years of infighting between the Greeks of the north and the Greeks of the south have been happening. So the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he will not stand, for schemes will be devised against him. Those who eat his choice food will destroy him, and his army will overflow, but many will fall down slain. As for both kings, their hearts will be intent on evil, and they will speak lies to each other at the same table, but it will not succeed, for the end is still to come at the appointed time. Then he will return to his land with much plunder, but his heart will be set against the Holy Covenant, and he will take action and then return to his own land. At the appointed time, he will return and come into the south. But this last time, it will not turn out the way he did before. We've mentioned this before. Antiochus Epiphanes IV goes down to Alexandria. He's going to take over Alexandria, and Rome, in about 168 or so, sends this guy named Polybius and says, hey, stop picking on them. And Antiochus says, I'll think about it, and I'll give you an answer. And the story goes, he draws a circle around him and says, you give me an answer before you leave that circle. It will not go. What does it say? Verse 29, at the appointed time he will return and come to the south. So here comes Antiochus Epiphanes IV. He comes down to Alexandria, but this time it will not turn out the way it did before. Yeah, he got insulted. Somebody drew a circle around him and said, you kowtow to me, not the other way around. And so, as we know, the guy throws a hissy fit as he comes back up through Jerusalem. For the ships of Kittim, which is a reference to Rome, will come against him. Therefore, he will be disheartened and return and become enraged at the Holy Covenant and take action, so that he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Remember, we talked about Hellenism. Hellenism is where a Greek comes in and says, Jews, stop acting like Jews. Or in other words, why don't you forsake your covenant? And everybody who forsakes the covenant, Antiochus Epiphanes will show regard for. Verse 31, forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary, fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation. Some people will say that he went in and wiped pig fat all over the interior of the temple. That's one of the things he did. By smooth words, he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give their understanding to the many. Yet they will fall by the sword, by the flame, by captivity, by plunder for many days. Now, when they fall, They will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. When you look around and you see Antiochus Epiphanes doing his stuff, guess what? It's not over yet. It's still coming. Now, I myself and few others that I know make a division right here. I think the rest of this text talks about Rome. Not everybody thinks that. Most people don't. I'll just tell you why. First of all, I said a second ago that Antiochus IV Epiphanes goes down to Alexandria, and when he gets down there, they say to him, what? Get out of here. Who's the boss? Rome. Essentially, from that time, Rome was the boss. Okay? Now, there happens to be a transition in the text here. I think, okay, so verse 36 talks about the king. The difficulty people have is that, wait a minute, it was talking about the king of the north, it was referring to the Seleucids. I don't have a problem with that. But Rome was also still in the north. And the Ptolemies were still in the south. So it wouldn't change, it would just change who it's referring to. We won't get into this unless you want to. He will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. This reminds you of the language of Daniel chapter 7 and Revelation, which applies to Rome. He will speak things against the God of gods. He will prosper until the indignation is finished. He's going to be doing all right until what I'm talking about is over. Well, it's over in AD 70, so that's how I take it to be referring to Rome. 4, that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers. Okay. You remember Cyrus came in, and one reason why he was able to come in and take over Babylon is because he showed regard for the gods of his fathers. One nation that didn't care about any gods besides America was Rome. They didn't care what god you had, as long as you would take your religion and make it subservient to my purpose. Okay? They do not show the regard for the gods of his fathers or the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god. For he will magnify himself above them. But instead he will honor a god of fortresses, a god from whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. He will take action against the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god, and he will give great honor to those who acknowledge him, and will cause them to rule over many, and will parcel out the land for a price. That sounds to me like Rome. That's all I'll say. You want to argue something else? Good. At the end of time, we just jump forward real fast. At the end of time, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots. So now we have the king of the south and the king of the north. During the end of time, it says here. I will say this. Rome really became Rome the empire when Cleopatra, the last Ptolemy, died with Mark Antony. If this isn't talking about that, then I just don't know what it's talking about. That's fine. Verse 41, at that time he will enter the beautiful land, and many countries will fall. And these will be rescued out of his hand, Edom, Moab, the foremost of the sons of Ammon. Then he will stretch out his hand against the other countries, and the land of Egypt will not escape. But he will gain control over the hidden treasures of the gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians will follow at his heels. But rumors from the east and from the north will disturb him. From the east, from the perspective of Rome. From the north, from the perspective of where he just was, which is in Egypt. You go north from Egypt and east from Rome, and one place you end up in is Jerusalem, which is where they were starting to get rumors that the Jews, who at one time had called them on the phone and said, please come, now hated them. And remember, this is where Josephus and all of those are running around trying to throw off the Roman Empire. Well, he hears this rumor. Hey, is it really going on? And he sends who but Titus and others to come. And from the north, it will disturb him, and he will go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. And he will pitch his tents of the his royal pavilion between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. So here's his army sitting right there looking at the mountain. Yet, he will come to his end, and no one will help him. Yeah, he's going to hurt you guys, but in the end, like the book of Revelation, he's going to be destroyed. Chapter 12, verse 1. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time, and at that time your people, everyone who is found written in the book of life, will be rescued. In the book, I should say, will be rescued. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, even these to everlasting life, and others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of the heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like stars forever and ever. But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. Okay, there's a mouthful. The last few verses I'm not going to read. Daniel's informed of the timing, the certainty, and the cruelty of the fulfillment of the vision, and Daniel himself is comforted about his end of days. Verse 13 says, as for you, go your way to the end, then you will enter into rest. Rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. That sounds nice. When you're done reading Daniel chapter 10, 11, and 12, you get the idea that there will actually be a gap between the exile and the glorious future, the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. In fact, what you really get the impression of is that there is not going to be an ethnic nation anymore. Right? This is like Daniel 9. All of this was giving us more information about what would happen during the 70 weeks, if you will, of Daniel 9. We've said this time and time again. Comments or questions on anything here? I know I just went through a whole bunch of stuff. The idea is, the short of it is, your land is going to be destroyed. Your people are going to be destroyed. That's the short of it.
I have a question.
Okay?
I can find it again. Your verse said, something about one being held in esteem, refers to Daniel as being of high esteem, I think.
Yeah.
Mine used the phrase loved one. I was curious what's behind that.
Yeah. So that's chapter 10 and verse 11.
Yes, or I've got 19 actually.
Yep, both. And then chapter 9, verse 20. 23. So chapter 9, verse 23. The idea is desirable or precious. If you, what does your version say?
Greatly loved.
Yeah. Do you greatly love your wife? Yeah. Do you value her also? That's the idea.
Also a comment, an observation. How would I say this? Perhaps this is too much in my head. I struggle to imagine what it is like to be told bad news of what's going to come after you, but then to try to find comfort in the fact that that my end is going to be, for lack of a better word, pleasant, I guess I'll say. And there's something to be learned there. I mean, it's the lesson of worry, actually, the things that you can't help, that sort of thing. Because, at the moment I feel like if I was told, sure, you're going to die sweet and happy, but your children are going to be fighting and burning, in the generations to come, I would find myself very uncomforted by what I had been blessed with for myself, and perhaps that's just but
Well, it wasn't Hezekiah.
Right. So there's an expectation or a realization that the person whom God finds worthy of esteeming has reached the point of faith where they can do this.
Yeah.
Where they can come to their end and be just thankful.
Although he was quite concerned.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And he had to be told several times, you'll go your own way to your allotted portion. I will say this about being esteemed. O man of high esteem, or highly favored one, or loved one, or whatever it is. 3 times that's said of Daniel. If at my death, the only thing that is said about me was that I was loved by God. Yes, thank you. I consider everything else. At the same time, he also says, as for you, go your way to the end. You will enter rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. Does that sound negative to you? Not at all. God's saying you're going to get what you've been fighting for. How long? How long have you been doing this?
Probably 90, I think.
More than 70 years, right? 70, 90, whatever. A long time. He's been out there fighting day in and day out. We read, just that much of his life compared to the 90 years that there is. If I say, yeah, that's what I want to hear that. I want to hear that at the end. In order to get through chapter 12, verse 13, what do you got to go through? Chapter 1, verse 1, all the way through chapter 12, verse 12, right? And so if you want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, you've got to go. You've got to live the life. At the same time, in chapter 10, it said in verse 11, O Daniel, man of high esteem. In chapter 12, to get to verse 13, you got to go through the whole book, chapter 1, verse 1 through 12:12. In chapter 10, to get to verse 11, you got to go through verse 12, which is backwards. Verse 12, he said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and humbling yourself, your words were heard. How is it that Daniel got to be called, O man of high esteem? Because beforehand he had set his heart on understanding. So what does that tell us, by the way, about understanding? It just comes naturally. I can just understand it because I'm so smart. No, you understand what you can. You go out and you do it. And you say, oh, whoops, that's not what it meant. And you come back and you a little more. Oh, by the way, you set your heart on understanding this and humbling yourself. Humility doesn't come naturally. You've got to, I am going to be humble. I'm going to work on being humble. So I need to work on being humble. We all need to work on being humble. Comment or question? Sometimes our work takes courage. Daniel's work, did it take courage? Yeah. Over and over, God said to him, the being said to him, take courage, take courage, take courage. Talking to strangers about God, does that take courage? How about talking to coworkers? Does that take courage? In fact, I would suggest that I'm going increasing in difficulty here. How about talking to family? How about talking to brethren? We need to talk. Take courage. It's not always fun. How about making tough choices? How about getting divorced for the right reason? What I mean by this is, can you think of anybody in the time of Ezra that got divorced for the right reason? Was it tough? Tough choices. And what does Ezra say? Be courageous when you do this. We could go on. I'll just make 2 more points here. The world is not in total chaos. If you had looked at that map, if you were alive back then, if you read any history book, you think, wow, it's chaos. But God said, I will tell you what is written in the writing of truth. It's already written down. From God's perspective, it's so sure. He knows that, right? And that's why he can tell us what's going on in chapter 11 and 12. He can tell us for hundreds of years what's going to happen beforehand. So much so precisely that the critics disregard it. They say, well, obviously it was written in 150 BC. And he made some mistakes, didn't he? Because he has Belshazzar, so on and so forth. But it's so precise because God knows these things. And so when you look out and you see what's going on in the Middle East right now, it's chaos. Yeah, from one perspective it is chaos, but from another, God's in control. Which means that there is not one trend out there that God isn't aware of. Oh, wasn't expecting that trend from this populace. That's not the way God works.
Jews rejecting Christ.
Yeah, whoops, didn't know that was happening. So the point is this, he understands every trend. And this book is a guide about how to get through that trend. Last night on my way home from a Bible study, I was listening to an interview of Michael Caine, an actor. He was born in the 30s. Born in the 30s, in London. So in London, he was born in the 30s. They're just reeling from a recent war and depression. He's born in a depression. Then, in the 40s, what happens in London? Bomb after bomb after bomb. He said that he learned agony, terror, fear, and joy there. When the bombs started falling, agony. When it prolonged itself for 6 years there, fear, constant fear when it was finally over, joy. So he goes from a depression to, as a 60 or 70-year-old boy, he is learning, he goes into this war. Later on, in the 40s, he is in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. He was drafted to go to war in Korea in his 20s. He comes back from war in Korea, and in London, there's still rationing going on. He said the only heat they had was coal. There was smog everywhere, every day. That was in the 40s. In the 50s, there was more, or maybe that was, I'm missing something here. It's either more depression or more of this. The rationing was going on in the 50s still. Then in the 60s, Khrushchev calls up and says, hey, I've got an A-bomb, and you're going to die in 4 minutes. That was his life for the first 40 years of his life. Now, that entire time. So the question the interviewer was asking was, why were the 60s like the 60s? And Pete Townsend, is he from The Who? Pete Townsend and Michael Caine answered the same way in two different interviews. They both said, we grew up in England for 40 years. There was constant misery. And then we finally decided in the 60s, we don't care anymore. And we're going to do whatever we want. Now, if you'd looked at the world back then, you would have said, that's chaos. And yeah, it was. But you know who was in control? God was in control. And that entire time, he's waiting to see who's going to break. Who among my people are going to say, that's it, I've had enough, I'm going to do what I want to do. Because apparently, it led a lot of people to do that, over there and over here at the same time. But at the whole time, God's in control, and this book is written for those situations, or in times of peace, whatever the case might be. All right, I'm all done. Comments or questions on this? Thank you for your work. And John Bosworth, will you pray for us, please?